enough? Yep. Are we ready, everyone? Yep. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming this evening. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you haven't already signed in at the back door at the podium, if you'd be kind enough to do that before you leave for this evening, I would appreciate it. First item on the agenda this evening is review and approval of the minutes from the last two meetings. If anybody has any additions or comments, if they'd be kind enough to share them. Otherwise, I'd look for a motion to approve the minutes, please.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That will take care of our minutes. Number of public hearings this evening. The first one is a subdivision variance for Mr. Ken Durst and Janice Borgstrom Durst.
Alright, so I'll just give a background on this project. Those of you who were at the previous Planning Commission meeting will already know a bit of the details surrounding this proposal here. So at the previous meeting we were discussing a proposed minor subdivision, and based off of the comments that resulted from the review of that proposal, we came back and asked the applicants to also apply for a subdivision variance. There were a few reasons why that was, namely because the proposed lot that was created through this minor subdivision was too small in area and too narrow in width based off of the requirements of the zoning district. And so with that, we asked them to apply for this subdivision variance here. So running through that, let's see. There's a few different criteria that the city has to find with subdivision variances. I'll just read them all out here. One is the requested subdivision variance is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of this chapter. 2, the requested subdivision variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable city plans. 3, the applicant has established that there are special circumstances or conditions, such as topography, drainage, or other natural occurring characteristics affecting the property, such that the strict application of the provisions of this chapter would deprive the applicant of the reasonable use of the land. And finally, 4, the impact of the variance will have on the public health, safety, and welfare of the other property in the vicinity in which the property is situated. So based on all of those criteria that we have there, staff generally finds that the subdivision variance is applicable and has a bonus of remedying the special circumstance which we have outlined as the existing structure on one of the lots that was built right up to the property line back in the year 1900. So that's what I have.
But if I understand your paperwork, sir, the variance comes down to basically a lot area that's 43 square feet smaller, and a lot width that's 5 feet narrower?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Anybody have any other questions for Ian? If not, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. If anybody has anything to share on this particular subdivision variance for Mr. and Mrs. Durst, if they'd be kind enough to come up to the podium. Start with your name and your address, please.
My name is Justin Parkin. I live at 603 2nd Street Southwest. I would like to submit a petition to oppose this subdivision variance by the neighbors of up and down the street of the subdivision. Currently, at the time of this meeting, I have 22 signatures, and I'll submit this to you. I am very concerned about the lack of the green space that will be created on this if this variance is granted. The rainwater runoff from the new impervious surfaces, the house, the garage, the driveway, would greatly increase the water flow on my property. I'm worried about my 100-plus-year-old basement flooding if this goes through, and possibly the hydraulic pressures on my 100-plus-year-old basement walls. And also with that, if allowing this variance, I feel would, lower my property value and make it harder for me to sell my property when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I turn this into somebody?
If you'd be so kind, would it come to, thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, Ian, what is the green space calculation on this lot?
It's calculated at 40%, which is the maximum that's allowed for the zoning district.
So it meets the requirement.
Yes, it does meet the requirements.
What-
Yes.
By splitting the two, by putting this, what is the green space on the property that's adjacent to it that you was splitting? Because that is built on the property line, how much is on that one? Because that runoff would've gone into this lot, you know, and being they're that close.
I've also have that one at 40% per the submission by the applicant.
It's hard to look when you look at the picture.
So, we're here discussing a variance. The variance doesn't go through, there's nothing that we're saying that says that they still can't build a house on the property regardless, right?
Correct. My perspective, we'll try to understand what you need to do to the structure to eliminate the need for a variance. At least that's the direction my mind drifts in.
That, which lot is it that's the vacant, 18? Let me check. Yeah, so lot 18 is, with the proposed building on it, is gonna be in conformance, right? So,
Right.
if we don't approve the variance, they can still build the building there anyway, right?
We would not be able to approve the minor subdivision without approving the variance, because the size of the lot and the width of the lot are not in compliance with the code.
But lot 18 currently is, right?
No. It's not currently, right?
No, not to my understanding.
It's under 8,000 square feet.
Right.
It's 43 square feet.
With the minor subdivision, it will be under 8,000 square feet, yes.
Right, so if we don't approve the variance, presumably they wouldn't do the subdivision. I would assume.
Correct,
In
yeah.
which case, they would just build the building on 18 and leave 17 non-conforming, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Ian, you're saying it's not a buildable lot without this variance.
Yeah,
Generally speaking, is that correct or not?
The purpose of the minor subdivision and the variance is so that we correct for the existing structure on lot 17 being built right up to the property line. So with the minor subdivision, we're moving that lot line over, so there's a proper 6.5-foot minimum setback on that side, which the applicants requested and they wanted because once they sell the proposed new lot, you know, they're not going to be owned by the same person. So if they ever want to access that side of the building, it's going to be incredibly difficult without having to trespass across their neighbor's property now. So with the minor subdivision, we'd be eliminating that issue, but we need the the subdivision variance on top of that, because the new lot being created through the minor subdivision is not in compliance with the code.
So ultimately, an approval or non-approval of the subdivision doesn't affect whether or not they build on Lot 18 or not. It just makes it difficult for them to sell 17 because they'll probably have to have a CUP with the new owners because of the lot line, right?
Access agreement.
Am I
Yeah,
understanding that
yeah.
correctly?
Right.
I mean, so, yeah, lot 18, I mean, they could build off of they could build far enough off on that lot if they had to, right? I think the whole point behind this was, what Ian's talking about is trying to correct the issues that exist in the coding, yeah.
I'm just trying to
Sure. No,
to
it's fair.
address what I heard from the public comments.
Yeah.
And where I understand what the concerns are, that I don't think there's anything we can do to prevent them from building on Lot 18. So in that, considering that, the subdivision, I think, would still be a benefit. Like Ian said, because it does fix one non-conforming condition from the adjacent lot.
I think that's why Ian brought it up, because he's trying to solve that situation, which exists currently.
This current lot 18 meets the minimum width requirement and the minimum area requirement
Correct.
as it stands today.
Correct, yep.
So, in theory, if the variance did not go through, then there could be an access easement to maintain the side of the house on lot 17. But
Yeah, I
18
mean,
is
they're
still
still gonna have,
buildable.
we would require them to
Either
build
way.
we'd require them to build that new home 6.5 feet off the property. So,
Right.
so you're gonna have one built, one home that's on the property line, and then you'd have one that's 6.5 feet away. So standard, in a new subdivision, you'd have 6.5 and 6.5, that's what you'd see like, in a newer subdivision. Here, it's just because of the historic nature of the construction, like Ian mentioned, that it's kind of skewed that way. So I think
Conditions.
the intention was to correct that issue so that, but then in correcting that, you have to vary the other lots. So you're fixing one issue, and then you're allowing a variance for a lot that's smaller than, would be deemed appropriate.
What's happening on 16? What's there?
On 16?
Because the issue is on the right side of that property, isn't it? Aren't you seeing?
No.
Oh, we're looking at lot 17 and lot 18 on that.
Yeah.
Here, it's too close to that property line on the
Okay.
west side.
Actually, it looks like there's a lot of properties on that street that are pretty close to the property lines.
Yeah, and I think that's why when Ian talks about, would not be outside of the historic nature of the district to make this alteration. I mean, you're looking at a 43-foot difference from square footage to be correcting for anyways. And I think, we had talked a little bit last time, Ian, about doing a jog in the backyard, and then the applicant didn't want to do that, is that the case?
Yeah, I communicated that to the applicant as requested, but...
It doesn't prevent a variance because they need it for the lot width
Right,
regardless.
they would need a variance either way.
That's true.
One of the conditions of the subdivision also was the removing of an overhead line too? Or they'd allow, we put an easement on the property line for that electric line?
Yep, so, yep, and the site plan and the certificate of survey have been changed to allow for that. So now there's a 5-foot utility easement that runs along the south side, the street side of those lots.
Without the subdivision, would we still do that? I think it'd still kind of be necessary, it looks like, to build the structure based upon the site plan, but...
Yeah, I would say that was the direction from our electric supervisor, that I mean, if you look at the original site plan that they had submitted, the corner of the structure goes like right up to the corner of, or the edge of that overhead electric line, so,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, that's another issue that comes up when you have both lots owned by one property owner. Sure, you can kind of account for that, but once they're owned by different property owners, you know, that becomes an issue to be corrected for.
Can you explain that green space again for me, Ian? You said we got like a minimum
So
area requirement?
Right. The maximum required impervious is 40% for the R1 single-family residential district.
Okay.
And I have both lots at being 40% or less.
So, with the public hearing of, they were talking about water, did anybody actually verify that is 40%, or are we just, I mean, did we verify that as a city? Or are we just taking the word, I mean,
You're basing it off of the square footage calculations, right?
Right.
so, I mean, you've got square footage of the building and...
Yeah, he's got the
Okay.
square, well, and I think in that site plan, you've got the square footage of the buildings there, so if you look at you've got the square footage of the lots.
Of the new one, but the old one was hard to...
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure the numbers are
And
exact. and-
parcel B would be 9,410 square feet, and parcel A would be 7,957 square feet. So, I mean, taking that, subtracting out the impervious surface, that would give you your calculation. I imagine that's what you did, Ian, when you looked at it.
Yeah, I did it just now even. So they've got, for parcel A, which is, lot 18, they have it as 3,145 square foot of impervious, which divided by the 7,957 square foot lot area is 39.5%.
Basically, it's the maximum size for the lot, yeah.
And that included that rear shed that's on there?
I believe they're getting rid of that shed. Let's see here.
Because if the shed stays, then it would be over, so let's see.
So, yeah. So, I mean, that would have to be a condition that we would add to that requirement, is the removal of the shed.
Temporary structures work their way into the calculations?
I don't know if that would be considered a temporary structure or not.
That includes that 3,145 includes the existing
Oh, it does,
square.
okay.
Okay.
So if they got rid of it, it would be even less.
Double checking.
No, good questions.
So is there a viable path forward without the variance?
Is there?
Maybe that's not our question to answer.
Right.
You know, I personally have no problem turning down the variance and asking him to go back and find a path forward that doesn't require a variance. My hatred for variances has been stated so many times, I'll state it again. That would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, so really, you're saying that you prefer they get a CUP with the lot when they sell it rather than...
I'm saying let's throw a little creativity at it and see if we can find a better solution, is really what it boils down to. I'm not recommending any given path forward outside of a conversation at this stage.
Well, Tom, if that's your feedback, then maybe you should table it for tonight, and then Ian can go back to the applicants and see what they have to say. I mean, it sounds like that would...
Yeah, is there,
Looking at this map, there seems to be quite a few properties on this street that have buildings on the property line. Where's my map? I'm curious if there's CUPs in place for any of these other properties, or
Probably not back from that, if they're over 100 years old.
yeah.
what the conditions are.
I don't recall any, but you shouldn't rely on my memory for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
I'm good
start
for
to
about
push
2
100
weeks.
years old,
Yeah. No. So, any more questions, any more conversation? Anybody want to make a motion? Can I make a motion? I
You sure
typically don't.
can.
I would make the motion, we table this and kick it back to see if we can't find a path forward to, that requires, or doesn't require a variance. Do I have a second?
I can second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That would be our recommendation.
All right, thank you.
Is that fundamentally,
just,
did you have
can you,
comments, sir?
just one more thing for Ian. Can you make sure on that existing house that, lot 17 or whatever, the picture doesn't show the dimension. Make sure that it is the 40% or less green space. Because what you show here, I can't tell.
On lot 17.
Isn't it 17 is the existing house, so 9,000 square feet? But it doesn't show the exact dimensions of the house and the garage.
You can sure check on that.
Yeah, I can.
I mean, I just,
You can kind of see the shadows here on this, on the
Yeah.
purchase, but there's no dimensions.
right.
Sounds good. And yeah, that would eliminate your discussion under number 8 then as well for tonight.
Okay, and we can table it again since it was tabled in September?
I think we just won't take it off the table. How's that sound?
Perfect.
Let me make sure.
I'll wait until we get there and I'll let you have that conversation any way you see fit.
60-day rule on that, deadline for action is November 19th,
Right.
correct?
And then on top of that, we can ask for an automatic 60-day extension on top of that if necessary, so.
Just don't want to create another problem by solving one problem, so it doesn't,
No, it sounds good.
that's not progress. Nothing else on the matter? If not, we'll move on to our next conditional use permit, or pardon me, next public hearing, which is a conditional use permit for a fence. Mr. Caleb Reeder, if I pronounced that correctly? Reeder, thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's see here. So pretty straightforward, this is at 2002 8th Avenue Northeast. Let's scroll to it here in the packet. Okay, so here's a picture of what it would look like. Got 3 neighbors there, one to the north and the east and the south. Let's see, there's a 5-foot utility easement that runs along the rear line there. So with this one, I'm just having the 2 standard conditions of approval with this one, just an acknowledgement of that easement, and then getting the access easement agreements recorded with each of the 3 property owners.
Is there an existing fence east of this property, sir?
To the east of the property. I'll have to find it in my packet here so I can see it closer. It appears that there is, let's see, perhaps the property owner could enlighten during the public hearing portion.
Wonderful. I will save my question for that. Does anybody have any questions for Ian before I? No? If not, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. This is for the conditional use permit for Mr. Caleb Reeder. If anyone has anything they'd like to share on the topic, if they'd be kind enough to come up to the podium and start with your name and address, please. It's up to you, sir. I'm not trying to twist your arm.
Hi, I'm Caleb Reeder. So me and my wife are just applying for a permit. We just want to put a fence for our backyard because we plan on getting a dog sometime soon here, and we want to add a little extra property value to our house. So we want to try to get as much square footage as we could in the backyard for it, so that's why we're applying for a conditional use permit. So
Okay. Was there an existing fence there on this line?
there is on theirs, but Dave told me that it's 1 foot off of their property line, so that way I can't tie into it or anything, but
Okay, so now you're just gonna put it on your on the shared property line?
yeah, we put it on our property.
And that's the direction I was headed with my question on that.
Does that create a maintenance issue?
For Dave.
There's the same rights with the existing neighbor, but then he would not likely want to sign off unless,
Right.
because of 1
I
foot
guess
is
you
not,
could spray that section along there, but it's, you know, if it's only 1 foot, you have to...
he ain't gonna be able to mow
whip
it.
it or something like that, but that'd be about it.
Have you decided what your building materials are gonna be, sir? Is it gonna be a wood fence, a chain link fence?
We haven't decided for sure. We're hoping to do a privacy fence for it. It's a vinyl fence, but we haven't contacted anybody yet on it, so.
Any other questions? No?
How tall will that fence be?
We're planning on doing like a 6-foot fence.
Just to save you the hassle, if your neighbor behind you that has existing fence does not sign the agreement, would you just move your fence in a little?
Yeah, yeah, we would. Fair question.
Right, I mean, 'cause that's the only issue I can see is you want to be able to maintain it.
Yeah,
We're just trying to make it easier for both of you.
sure, yep.
That's all I had.
That's all we had for you, sir?
Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, like I say, he already knows that he might have to move his fence and talking to the neighbor. That's up their decision to make it easier, so.
The whole process is to get people talking, so
Yep.
they're
No,
working.
Yeah.
so. If there's nothing else, I'd look for a motion, please.
I'll make the motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That would be our recommendation.
Thank you, we'll bring that to council on Wednesday.
Next up, we've got another conditional use permit for a fence. This one is for Mr. Thomas Dolan.
Another pretty straightforward here. So here's what the lot looks like. Just another fence built up to the property lines, or within 3 feet of the property lines to the sides and the north. Let's see. This one has a 10-foot utility easement on that rear property line there. So same as the other one and all the other ones, just the same conditions of acknowledging that utility easement and getting access easement agreements filed with each of the neighbors.
Any questions for Ian? If not, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. This is specifically for the conditional use permit for a fence for Mr. Thomas Dolan. Again, if anybody has any thoughts they'd like to share, if they'd be kind enough to come up to the podium. If not, I'll close the public hearing.
I did have one question now that we're closing the public hearing. So
Please.
the deed holder is actually EB Pine Island LLC. So the question I had, is it a rental? Is this a renter, Ian?
No, the property was recently sold. Their closing date was the 29th, I believe.
Because that isn't reflected by the county yet, so. Which is fine, I mean, the county may be behind.
Yeah.
Within a month or two, usually they're a little behind, but just, that was my concern, was to make sure that, you know, we're, that's all on the up and up. So if he's recently purchased that, that's fine.
Yep.
And you have documentation on that purchase?
Let's see, it was with Oh, I think you were one off. It's with, Justin Z.
Oh, okay.
Property over, but,
Well, I guess the point's the same. It's not
yeah,
the
the
same
point
owner.
is the same. I don't have documentation of the purchase, but I,
Well, so why don't we get documentation of that purchase before we, or either that or you can call the county and just check, make sure
Okay.
that's recorded, because obviously we want to make sure that's not an issue.
so we'll make that a condition of approval then?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. At least my feedback would
I like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
make sure that he owns it before we put a fence up.
You wouldn't wanna be putting a fence, of course, one wouldn't wanna put a fence on anything if you didn't own it, but that's not stopped.
Somebody else did just move into that. Just very recently.
Yeah. Do you know if they're planning on taking those trees out then on the backside or not?
I'm not sure about that.
I know that Mr. Wilkers put trees in as a screening item on that south side of his property previously. So that's one, I mean, I think it's probably a good spot for a fence because it does border that commercial property.
I'm a little curious why they got a gate going into Wilker's property on that back end, though. It seems kind of unusual. Unless Mr. Wilker gave them permission to walk through there. But,
Anyway, 4-foot gate. So you could probably get out, though, if it's on the property line, he still has to maintain it, it's probably easier than going all the way around. Will be my theory.
yeah, okay.
Does the fence not all the way go all the way to the north property line? Is that what it is? Because it looks like it's 28 feet on that side, on the west side, and just kind of looking at it on the aerial, where that would come back. Doesn't
You
seem like
know-
that's 28 feet all the way back.
Right.
It seems farther than that.
And on his application, he does say that the fence will be on the property line, so if the numbers are a bit off,
Okay.
going with what he stated.
It's possible it could be on the property line on the east and west side, but maybe not on the north,
Okay.
just from the dimensions given. So that could be the
Yeah, I
reason for
think
the
that's
gate.
maybe the question, because, I mean, you're right, it's only got 24 and 24 plus 4. So, I mean, he's only got, 52 feet, and it's a 70-foot width lot, too, so.
One side or both.
Just a few things to check in, but nothing to stop the progress, I don't think.
No.
Points of clarification process.
Yeah, just to make sure we're all,
I'm looking for proof of ownership or permission from the current property owner. And I'm looking for where is the fence exactly, is it on the property lines, because it doesn't add up with the numbers. Okay.
Well, one of these appears to be a quote from a contractor.
yeah, so I was just looking at that, schematic they've got there, it's a 70-foot width lot, and he's got 24 and 24 and then 4, so, I mean, obviously that isn't, might just be on that, maybe it's just on that north property line, and it's not on the east and west, like you said, so.
Yeah, it looks like just from the dimensions, just kind of sort of eyeballing it and figuring it, that it's probably on the west property line, it looks like, because that's 11 feet from the dimensions for the sketch that's given. It's 11
Sure.
feet.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
And then you look at the aerial, that looks like 11 feet from the side of the house to the property line on the west side.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And then, so I don't think on the
On the
north.
east side, he's not coming all the way over, okay.
If you look on the east side, it looks like there's a retaining wall there, so he's probably stopping at that.
I think it only touches one property line.
Well, he wouldn't need that access agreement then on the east side,
Right.
so that's something to keep in mind, too.
Well, if he's not on the property line, right.
Yeah, we kinda need to know which ones we need access agreements for to verify before we approve it, right?
Conditional use permit. But,
Well, if we could change the language too, and say, any property owner within 3 feet of the fence.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Any other questions? If not, I would look for a motion, please.
I'll make the motion to approve with the added questions answered.
Motion to approve with added questions. Do we have a second?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I'm gonna take that as a second. We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That would be our recommendation.
all right, we'll bring that to council on Wednesday as well.
Next public hearing, preliminary plat for East Creek Commercial Park Second.
All right. So this is, the area covers an approximately 7.2 acre parcel that's just northeast of City Hall here. We've seen a bit of development over in that area recently. But essentially the applicant is looking to make a subdivision with this parcel to create a one smaller lot that's about 3/4 of an acre and build a building on that lot, and then the remainder of that lot would be held as an outlot essentially, perhaps if there's future development in that lot or parcel outlot, it will be platted again in the future. But just for now, to create the one parcel out of the larger parcel, it requires a preliminary plat and final plat approvals because it's currently unplatted. Let's see. So there's been a bit of discussion along with the plat having to do with getting a water main looped through there. So that's been a point of discussion at previous council meetings. And let's see here. It shows up here on the preliminary plat as well. Paralleling an existing a sanitary sewer easement there. So this over here is Commerce Drive Southeast. There's going to be a public hearing at the next council meeting to vacate this right-of-way easement for Commerce Drive Southeast and turn it into a utility easement, drainage and utility easement. Let's see. So I've got 3 conditions of approval here. I'll just read them out loud now. All development-related fees and application fees shall be paid prior to releasing the final plat for recording. Number 2, the applicant shall submit to the city an updated plat addressing comments from the city engineer, including the continuation of a 10-foot utility easement through the property. And 3, the applicant shall submit to the city a site plan review application. Administrative approval shall be granted before development occurs.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Ian? If not, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. This particular public hearing is for the preliminary plat for East Creek Commercial Park Second. If anyone has anything they'd like to share, if they'd be kind enough to come up to the podium, please. If not, I will close the public hearing. Gentlemen, thoughts?
I don't see any issues.
Nor do I. I mean,
the city has been working with the property owner, and they've come to an agreement for the easement. I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Sure, and I can just run through some of those terms if you want to, just so we're all on the same
Yeah.
page. So there's the vacation of that road on the east side. There'll be that utility drainage easement. We know it's kind of a wet area anyway, so it needs to have something there. That south half of 3rd Street Southeast will be dedicated to the city. So currently however it was done in the platting process, it didn't get dedicated, so that'll be taken care of. And then this, as Ian mentioned, there'll be a loop in the water system that'll parallel that sewer line. In exchange, the city's gonna be taking care of that. We'll be paying for that water loop installation, pending, hopefully, some development, that'll come in the next 5 years here, right, Don? We'll see. Hopefully it does, though, for both of us. But there you go, that's right. But otherwise, the city will have put the bill there for that, and then we'll be helping with reseeding and making sure that's all taken care of and maintained properly while we're going through the project. And I think Don's looking at building a building here in the next little bit, and hopefully it'll go forward, and, it shouldn't be an issue then.
And we really needed that water loop.
Yeah, the water loop will be real helpful for the folks over on the east side there and those subdivisions over there for
Yeah,
sure,
so-
so.
It's nice that we have a place that we can get it run through now, so I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
well, it'll make sense too for Don, I mean, in the long run, you know, that
And for the
property
city.
will develop, so, yeah, yeah.
So out of curiosity, since we're vacating this Commerce Drive, does that mean the existing Commerce Drive is just gonna be a street to nowhere right now? And into the future?
Not necessarily. No, I mean, I expect in the fullness of time, as those roads develop over there, it'll be extended. You know, what the name will be of the road itself, I'm not sure, you know, right now you've got Third Street South, southeast, and then of course you've got Commerce, so I think as Commerce is extended to the east, Paul, that'll probably have a new name, it'll be a new Commerce Drive.
It looks like, and maybe this was the intent of the way Commerce Drive was built, is that it follows the existing easement that is already going through Mr. Marty's property, and then the water one that's gonna join it.
Yeah, so I mean, I would anticipate that at some point in time, that Commerce Drive southeast on the west side will extend over, and I don't know exactly what the alignment will be, but it'll probably hook onto that third at some point, and then, you know, there'll be a choice made when that road name will flip from Commerce to Third, if that makes sense. But that's something that'll have to be determined as we go forward.
That property to the south that's unplatted, is that in the city?
No, I believe that's in the township still.
Oh, okay.
straightforward.
Yep.
It's been discussed and
I would look for a motion, please.
I'd make a motion.
Motion to,
Approve.
motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That would be our recommendation.
All right, thank you very much.
And the last of our public hearings is an ordinance for managed natural landscape.
So we had a discussion about this at the last planning commission meeting, but essentially the state passed a new statute that requires cities to allow for managed natural landscapes within city limits. So based on the review of our code doesn't explicitly prevent managed natural landscapes, but it was the guidance from the planning commission that we add the language from the state statute into our own ordinances. So basically, I took the wording from the state statute and just fit it into our existing code language. So you can see there in the packet, anything that is red is new. So essentially, for the bit of the code that talks about tall grass and weeds, it says like except as part of a managed natural landscape as defined. Then it also adds a definition for the height. So rather than just simply saying tall weeds or grass, it now gives a height of greater than 8 inches is considered a nuisance. Let's see. And then there's also a bit of language that says managed natural landscapes may include plants and grasses in excess of 8 inches in height and that have gone to seed, but may not include any noxious weeds and must be maintained. Managed natural landscapes do not include turf grass lawns left unattended for the purpose of returning to a natural state. And then I'm also proposing to add a few definitions. These were also in the state ordinance, or state statute. Definitions for managed natural landscape, meadow vegetation, ornamental plants, rain garden, and turf grass lawn. If there's any questions?
No questions? If not, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. This is for the ordinance tied to managed natural landscape. If anyone has anything they'd like to share, if they'd like to come up to the podium, please. If not, we will close the public hearing. I'm not exactly sure how high a demand we're gonna see for this particular amenity.
no, but it's nice that we have the same rules as the state, so it makes more sense.
There you go.
Well, whether we like it or not, there's really not much we can do if the state's mandated it, so.
Right.
Yeah,
At least now we can at least have a guidance.
I mean, I think the
staff.
biggest key is we're still gonna enforce the, rules that we have on the books for grass cutting as much as we can. Obviously, this year was a little bit exceptional. We didn't have as many this year because it was so dry, but I know there are a couple lots out there that people have been lagging on pretty good, so. But yeah, it allows somebody, if they're actually gonna have a plan to do natural landscaping, to do it in their yard, so.
Are we gonna have any sort of registration or a database of,
Is that something you've contemplated, Ian?
Yeah, and in our discussion last month, I did have like a sample permit application from the city of Mankato. It asked for like a plan and like a maintenance plan and, let's see, like a list of plants that they wanted to include. I'm not sure if that's something that we want to go through. I don't know.
Do you wanna wait and see how many natural landscape?
I don't know, I'd rather have the framework in place before anybody comes, because
Okay.
I don't want anyone to ever say, well, you're just trying to make it harder or easier for someone in particular.
That's true.
Makes sense, and I think
Yeah.
it would be good to have all the permits and all the stuff, because in the long run, somebody's gonna ask about it, and, you know, we wanna be transparent about things, you know?
Yeah.
But, that's just my opinion, that doesn't mean...
Well, it presents us a little bit more professionally should the question get answered, so.
Well, and then we have something to look back on.
I mean, right, we make a record of all the CUPs, we make a record of all the variants, there's a reason for those, so I mean, I guess it just means another Excel spreadsheet to keep track of everything in. So.
I like that.
Yeah.
These definitions were all copied from the state statute?
They were, yes.
They didn't put a definition of what a noxious weed is?
I believe that's defined elsewhere in state statute. I guess I didn't include it in here, but I can see if I can find a definition for that and add it to
I
the
mean,
code.
that would be nice.
I think a lot of people might think certain non-native grasses would be considered noxious weeds too, so
Okay.
I'd be
yeah.
curious to know what
What the definition.
what a
of
noxious weed is, yep.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, I think what you could do there is just, you've got the, looks like the DNR's got a list that's been designated by the state, and so you can just reference that. It's a pretty extensive list here I've got, so
Okay.
that's what I would do, because they may periodically add or subtract those.
That's
You know,
true.
the language is set up so that it incorporates those changes as too.
Yep.
There's nothing else, I look for a motion, please.
I can make the motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That would take care of our managed natural...
And I'll take that to include that it has a reference to the state statute and the
Please.
DNR guidance. Okay?
Please.
See you.
How do you want to handle number 8, sir?
Oh, let's see, what are we up to here? I would say, you know, we've got, Ken and Janice here tonight, so, you know, if you wanted to just discuss the situation with them a little bit, you certainly could, it's up to you. We did have that public hearing already, so.
How many names did you have on your list, sir?
23,
It
did you
said
say?
about 20, let's see, 1, 2, 22 I count.
22. Mr. and Mrs. Durst, we had 22 of your neighbors over here on the variance for the subdivision come forward with their concerns about it. And I guess the general consensus we came to on the Planning and Zoning Board was to table the issue, hoping to throw a little creativity at it to avoid the need for a variance, I guess is what it boils down to. And in terms of trying to discuss that or hash that out this evening,
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, the feedback, if we're not gonna do a variance, would be there, we would want some kind of access agreement so they can maintain the property on the
Okay.
east side, you know. That'd be something that could be required with the other lot. I mean, to me, I don't see another solution there for you really, other than, you know, allowing them to maintain that property. You know, ideally, there would be a way for us to allow for there to be more space on that side, even if it was only 3 feet, you know, or something like that, to allow them to get a mower's width in between, you know what I'm saying? I mean, my personal opinion on the variance would probably be to allow it, but obviously, you know, it's up to you guys to make that choice, and I can see why, if there's a lot of opposition from the neighborhood, there's, you know, their concerns. But, you know, the only thing I can see is if, you know, in terms of creativity, is if they wanted to do an access agreement on the property to the west, so that way the property to the east could be maintained, and then, you know, there's nothing stopping them from building a home on that current property the way it is, as long as it meets the setback requirements, which it should, so.
I don't know if there's more of a discussion to be had there.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that Ian would probably want to discuss that with the Durst,
Yeah, I mean-
off the record here, off the, you know.
Unless there's some value in doing it here, sir, I mean,
No, I don't think
okay.
so.
So as it pertains to number 8, do we
Leave it on the table.
leave it on the table? Okay. That pushes us to point number 9, discussion on possible vacation of 18th Street Northwest, ROW Road,
Right away?
right away?
Sure, and I can discuss this a little bit. So included in your packet, you have a couple of different sort of screenshots, in essence, of a site up on the north side of town here. So you can see the original plat there that was quite a, let's see, what year was that? We go back quite a ways there, I don't know, 1960, I think. This was actually filed. So this is not a road, it's a right-of-way that was dedicated as part of that plat. You've got Mr. Foote to the south and his family, and Mr. Toon to the north and their residents. When this was redone on Manorville Avenue, the contractor poured a concrete slab, basically in the right-of-way, allowing Mr. Toon to access his driveway. And so this has come up because typically the city staff do not plow those unimproved, you know, right-of-ways, which there are several in the city. So, when I spoke with the residents there, their question was, well, why aren't you gonna plow it? You know, we want you to plow it, either that or vacate it. I mean, those were, in essence, the words they gave us. So council was apprised of this. They discussed it, and they referred it to planning and zoning to review that. So the question is, you know, do we wanna vacate it? I know the city engineer believes that vacating in the future may create an issue, if we do end up having that become a road at some point in the future. At the same time, the council's direction in the past for situations of this nature was to not plow those in the wintertime. So, I guess that's the mayor's directive to the planning and zoning to review.
Because when they built the Quick Trip and the road, did they not add more gravel road between the properties?
Yeah, it was actually Hazelton as part of the 57 project. It
Yes.
didn't really have anything to do with Quick Trip.
Okay.
But they did eliminate that gravel that was in front of Mr. Foote's house, so now he accesses it from that concrete slab that's kind of right there between his house and Mr. Toon's house. So that, yeah, the gravel frontage in front is no longer there,
Right.
because it's in the MnDOT right-of-way.
I mean, I'm under the opinion that if we don't have any plans to build a road or development in the future, and really that stretch of road is gonna run into the Dodge County land if we extended it out, you know, once it goes through Mr. Schuete's property, in which case it would have to then turn south and just connect into 16th. So to me, it doesn't real seem like it has a point. So if we're not gonna have any plans for it, I say we just vacate it.
And to your point, Paul, you can see that alongside the back, kind of the west side of those lots, there is a backage, there's right-of-way that's been dedicated by the county for a backage road. That is the intention, I think, from the city engineer, in the fullness of time, as funding allows, that backage road would be built off the west side of the Quick Trip and Foot properties there, would connect in with Mr. Schuete's, and would also allow the county access to their county park that they're creating. So, I mean, I think in the fullness of time, you're right, the access will come off the west side. MnDOT has some restrictions on how many accesses they'll allow off the state highway and how close they can be to the roundabout. In this case, Quick Trip had some pull and managed to get one, but I'm not sure that another one will be allowed, certainly not for a road.
But that one's only accessible from the north.
Sure, that's just, that's in and out, it's not there
Strictly.
isn't a turn there, right?
It's a turn off, it's not necessarily a full access per se.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a right turn in and right turn out, right, kind of a spot there, yeah.
Turn out of there to the right, I think it's only open from the north. I don't think you can come out of there and go south.
I guess I'd have to take a look at their schematic again.
It looked like it, I think the way it's designed, it's just you can come from the north and turn in there, but if you wanna go out, you have to go out the south side.
I know you can't do a left turn out going north.
I don't think you can do a right turn out of there either.
Well, that's possible.
I think
I'd have
it
to
was
take a look at the
designed-
schematic again. Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that was just the way I understood the engineer talking about it, that it was gonna be a right turn from the north only, no exit
Yeah.
only.
And that's very possible. It doesn't allow Mr. Foot or Mr. Toon access, certainly. from-
Right.
It's been seeded now, so.
So we can't see it in this arch that's included. We also, looks like we have a platted 20th Street further up the road.
That's right.
Would that theoretically come in on the north side of Schuette's property?
Yeah, it would intersect into Schuette's property on farther north, on the north side, that's right.
Yeah, so I think this 18th is kind of just redundant and not necessary, because Schuette could have access from the 20th or this one to the west, like you said.
Right.
So I'm in favor of vacating.
Will there ever be a time where MnDOT could pull that access to their property?
To whose property?
To Foots and Toons?
Typically, MnDOT doesn't pull access without having some other access allowed. So in the current existing structure, if there was access...
But if that, like you said, there's a road coming
Yeah, I
on the
think if the
west side.
Backich Road existed and they had the ability to have a driveway that came into their property, then MnDOT would, I would guess very likely, would probably pull the access, especially if, as Paul mentioned, if Mr. Schuette was aiming for access further north. You know, if he was going for a street entrance into that 20th there, the 18th would probably get pulled because it's not a street.
And
You know, it's just a drive
Mr.
in.
Toon would not have access from the backside unless he went through the shooting property, but Foot would.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, currently, they have a shared, I mean, I don't know if they even have a shared use agreement, they just both use it.
Yes.
So you're right, I mean, if one of them wanted to block it, they probably could, but, I mean, they've been neighbors for a long time, so obviously.
Oh, yeah.
They work together on that, so. And we're not suggesting any changes to the access.
Right.
So, you know, when I've spoken with Charlie about it, I mean, Charlie always tells me, you know what, Public Works will do the best they can. They don't, you know, council directive in the past is to not plow these. You know, for example, you know, over on the west side of town, you know, we have some of these where they're old right-of-ways where we don't plow them. They're not public roads.
Do people use
So that's
them?
typically been the direction. But I know that Charlie said, you know what, if we need to plow the entrance to get Mr. Toon in, you know, on that concrete, you know, they can use a heavy plow still. It's just a matter of what are they gonna use to plow the gravel. You know, it's not typically something they do.
Well, yeah, and then if it was to be a city street, we wouldn't have to change it so it wasn't gravel down.
Well, right, we would have to improve it. That's right.
So, which is just another expense for a road that goes nowheres, would be easier to vacate it versus...
Well, I mean, it's up to you. You know, whatever you direct us as staff is what we'll do. But I'm just, those are the questions the council had for the planning zoning.
What is the engineer's thoughts? Has he really...
Well, I know when I've talked to Brandon, you know, he's always leery of giving up the right-of-way, just in case at some point in time there would be a need to change, and he's not as concerned about the road as he is if there was water and sewer that might be easier to serve off of that, for the Schuette property to the north and west.
Well, if Schuette wants water and sewer, then he should work with Mr. Toon and Mr. Foot to try and get that easement.
Yeah,
So that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
I don't think the city should be holding on to property that we don't have a good use for.
It's fine with me, like, yeah, you know, I don't have
Yeah, we're just-
whatever you guys wanna recommend to council is your prerogative, and, you know.
You know, and then, you know, if it's one less area, especially if they're going in there just to plow that little bit of a cement, it seems like a waste of staff time and public works time and...
That's the tier 3 or 4 or 5 priority. Get the rest of the city opened up, but unless there's any other discussion, I would look for a motion, please.
I guess I would make a motion to recommend to council that we vacate 18th Street right-of-way.
We have a motion to vacate. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That would be our recommendation.
All right, so recommendation to vacate, we'll bring that to council. Thank you.
All right, now what we've all been waiting for.
Now for the exciting stuff. Ian, parking study?
I've got this, it's been thrown into the Dropbox and also emailed out if you wanted to follow along, or you can also look up at the screen, of course. But yeah, pretty exciting stuff here. Completed all of my data collections for the parking study that I've been working on for the last several months now. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So from the scope of work that I had shared with you before, the purpose of the study was to gather data on utilization of current parking resources in order to determine needs for future additional parking downtown, and 2, to provide support for potential strategies necessary to improve the safety, beautification, and parking resources of downtown. So, as a reminder, these are the industry standards for measuring parking utilization. So anything under 74% is considered underutilized. Anything between 75 and 84% is considered normal utilization. Anything between 85 and 92% is approaching capacity. And finally, anything over 93% is considered at capacity. So this was the study area included, pretty much most of the main downtown core there. These are the specific zones that I included in the study, so you'll recall this from my previous presentation on this. However, I did add a couple of additional zones, but again, I've had them broken down into different colors depending upon the type of parking that exists in each spot. So red is the primary angled parking, so there's just 3 blocks of that on Main Street. It's the highest density of parking on Main Street and the highest density of businesses along Main Street as well. Blue is secondary parking, parallel parking, so a couple of blocks on Main Street, one on Main Street East, and then a couple of the side streets as well. So like I said, all of these are parallel. A little bit less of a higher concentration of businesses in these areas as well. And then finally, yellow. These are off-street parking lots, so a few dedicated parking lots for various businesses downtown that don't have a specific or that don't have off-street parking, or do but also have additional parking off-street. All right. So I have a few different phases included. The first was the pre-study phase, which was delayed a bit due to the delays with the Highway 57 project and the roundabouts. So I did that on August 17th, was the day of my field audit, where I determined the number of parking spaces in each of the different zones. So I've included that here, if you can see from here. Anything with an asterisk are areas that don't have like lines on the ground showing the exact parking spaces. So those are numbers that I just came up with based on my own measurements and what I believe you could get in a certain area if you parked like the most efficiently as possible. So with that, I broke the study up into 2 different phases. The first study phase was completed towards the end of August. I did Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 8 a.m., 12 p.m., and 5 p.m., so 3 times a day, 3 days of the week, just to get the numbers there. And so this page here shows all the raw counts in each of the different zones I identified. And then here is the actual utilization rates that I've calculated. So anything red is underutilized. Let's see. Yeah, anything in red is underutilized. Anything in yellow is normal utilization. Anything in green is approaching capacity. So in phase 1, you can see just based on the colors that it's pretty overwhelmingly underutilized across the board, with the exception of a specific block, 3rd Ave Southwest, saw a bit higher number of utilizations on that street. see, that's what I've got there, and then, let's see, and then moving on to phase 2, this I did later in September, but it was the same sort of deal, 3 days of the week, 3 times a day, and then this page here is the counts. There's a special note there because one of the off-street lots was closed for resurfacing, so no one could park there, so just probably disregard that. Let's see, that was like the very first column there, the Manorwood Court North parking lot. Yeah, it was closed on September 21st, and then to the morning of the 22nd, so that first row there. So here, the numbers again, so you can see pretty overwhelmingly underutilized again, except for one time it was 100% utilized. That was the 4th Ave Northwest block, was 100% utilized on September 21st at 8 a.m. So, yeah, so that's all the data that I've got for you. Pretty interesting to see there. I guess big takeaway is that it's underutilized pretty much across the board. I know that, let's see, we've talked about different improvements that could be made. We're talking about paving the city lot there, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think being an unpaved lot right now, people don't necessarily park the most efficiently, but by paving it, of course, that should help with that a bit as well. So that's what I've got there. Any questions?
I just see, like, when you look at it, though,
Yeah.
Main Street is underutilized quite a bit, even the liquor store parking lot, but I was surprised to see 3rd Avenue Southwest and 4th Avenue Northwest have moments where they're full,
Yeah.
like 80 to 100%.
Yeah, which,
Granted, they're
Map here.
early in the mornings, and
those were,
Oh, but Fourth Avenue's right by the hospital.
the ones that were utilized, was it actually 4th Avenue and 3rd Avenue, or was?
4th Avenue Northwest and 3rd Avenue
This is
Southwest.
4th Avenue Northwest.
Yeah,
right
but,
here.
I'm confused, sorry, go back to your spreadsheet. That one's fine. So when it says 4th Avenue Northwest 000 block,
Yep.
Yeah, that Main Street.
that means 4th Avenue, or does that mean Main Street after 4th Avenue?
Say that's 4th Avenue going north from Main
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah, so like 000, that just means that block, the numbers
Right from Main
start
Street.
with 0.
Yeah.
So it'd be like 10 and 20, 30, but not up to 100.
And that corner is a hot spot, obviously, because you
Yeah.
got Main Street on
So
the
the-
400 block, that's also...
Yeah, so then Main Street 400 block, that is that the 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue section?
Yep.
People are dropping.
Okay, okay.
So, I mean, I'm thinking that's probably gotta be Head Start,
And then
right?
3rd Avenue is the one that's lit up a lot,
And
right?
I would assume, being they're that busy in the morning, there's a lot of drop-off at Just Like Home and Mayo Clinic.
Now, we're discussing parking adjustments on Main Street. I don't think this far west would really have been included, would it?
Well, I mean, it's still part of the downtown, so I think that's...
I agree, I mean, the total parking spaces, yeah, but the parking spaces available in those areas weren't really the areas that we were gonna be potentially making adjustments, correct?
Paul, to that, I think we were talking about if we were to reduce parking at all by making it parallel in some spots. We're showing that there's parking that's available just a little bit further that's still within the downtown area. So even if
Right.
we're reducing parking in one spot, there's still parking that's available.
Right, well,
I mean, to the point of the Angles part, the core area has very low utilization. I mean, if that's what you're going with, Paul.
yeah, what I'm getting at is if we're looking at changing the angles, the areas that seem to be lit up are the ones that are already parallel,
That's right.
so,
And I don't know that we have actually discussed changing it. I think the council can make that at some future
Right,
point.
right.
I do know that, when that surface is redone, even if it's just a mill and overlay or it's a seal coat, which more likely than not, it's gonna be seal coated probably in the next 5 to 10 years. I mean, I think they seal coated it back in 2020. And that's when it's been lined most recently with the angle. A lot of complaints we get are actually that the angles are too tight.
close.
Right, so what'll end up happening is, let's just say it gets seal coated in 5 years, and it gets repainted. we're gonna lose some parking spots because the parking spots will be wider. Now, are we really gonna lose any? No, because people are already parking there, and when they're too tight, you just don't park there. So it'll actually be probably a little bit more efficient to have slightly wider lots, or spots. So, I mean, I think, and this is actually my first seeing this, right now. I didn't get briefed on it beforehand, but it's interesting to see, and I think it echoes a lot of the things that typically we see going through this area. I mean, one thing it doesn't take into account is, the movie theater is not operational. So that corner, which already is a busy corner, further down from there, certainly Friday night, Saturday night, would have additional need for parking, which, as I think you mentioned, which one of the reasons the council's looking at paving that parking lot behind the Legion. It also doesn't take into account situational parking events, which we know there are some, where there's a large event, there's, Oktoberfest on Main Street, or there's the St. Patty's Day, you're gonna see parking spikes like that. I think what Ian is trying to show here is the general level of parking. It's not for those situational events where we know that it's gonna be tight on a situational event when there's a lot of people downtown. City festivals or something like that. It's very interesting to add up. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, so the whole reason we did this parking study was to see if there was anything we could do to make people feel safer on Main Street crossing it specifically, right? So ultimately then, what is our next step? Are we gonna look at
Well, if you take a look
potential
at-
parking adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, so in the council
Um,
packets for Wednesday night, the city engineer has some proposals included there.
He's reviewed this data?
I don't know if he's reviewed this data yet, but
Okay.
something he and I have talked about is some traffic calming techniques. The
Okay.
council's already directed staff to maintain those stop signs at the First Street intersection on Main Street, which have been. Long-term, we need to have a better solution than just having the temp signs there. That isn't really
Because
gonna...
people still go through those.
Yeah, and we can't stop them from going through a stop sign, but having them held down by sandbags long-term is probably not the
No, but that-
most ideal thing. So, one thing that I think the city engineer is looking at is creating some traffic calming techniques using some paint and bump outs in a temporary fashion to allow those corners to narrow up. It won't actually affect the parking that's already there right now, because if you take a look at that, from the corner, I don't know how far it is, 20 feet or so, you're not supposed to be parking anyways, it's yellow striped, but, so, I think that that's what he's gonna propose in the short term, is that we look at that. Seeing that this data backs up the fact that we don't have a parking shortage,
Yeah.
it would allow us to have some of those where we were able to bring the corners closer in, kinda like they did up at the high school. If you go up to that intersection of 16th and 5th Avenue, they did those, this year they redid that, and they were able to narrow up the street. It doesn't affect traffic, it just allows the kids not to have to cross quite as far. And so I think
Yep.
that's kind of what we'll be looking at in the short term. And if that works, then I think if there is ever a time when, for example, Main Street gets rebuilt, that's when you would see it, maybe a more permanent structure put in place. If, for example, if you walk along Dodge Center, in Dodge Center, if you walk along their Main Street there, they actually have graduated bump outs. And that's something that a lot of people have shown to increase the safety for pedestrian traffic crossings. So,
And this might be too much to ask, but, with the engineer's proposals, did you say that the proposals wouldn't affect the current parking at all?
no, they wouldn't have to. I mean, it'd
Okay.
certainly be up to something.
Would you have some that would affect the current parking? I mean,
Well, I think if we install the permanent bump out where we expected the curb line, it would probably affect the parking.
yeah, 'cause what I think I'd like to see is if he's gonna propose a situation where we reduce the number of slots, Ian can then take the reduced number of slots and update these percentages with the proposed slots and see how much they go up.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
based on what I know right now, he's not proposing anything that will reduce slots, but, and that's a good point. I mean, in a future project, we want to take this data and we want to apply it in that case.
So-
And if the council decided to just throw caution to the wind and seal coat the road now and repaint it, we could also reflect the less slots that are allowed in it now as well.
When I, just looking at this, the city liquor store, which is underutilized, is that because it's so rough and we haven't refinished it yet? Do you think once we fix that next year, will that get utilized more and?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure why. It's possibly, it ebbs and flows with the number of residential units that are being rented above the buildings downtown. A lot of times those folks will park in that lot over the wintertime. So I know that kind of ebbs and flows as those are empty or full. A lot of the actual traffic the liquor store sees is very short-term, of course, because people
Right.
park and they go in and they come out. Most of the people that park there longer-term are going into one of the salons or going into one of the other businesses on Main Street or going to the Asian restaurant or something like that. So, I mean, it's very possible that after that's improved next year, you'll see a higher utilization for that longer term, too.
And maybe something as simple as a public parking sign, so people know it's public parking.
Right.
Could go a long way in communicating, hey, you know, you can park here and go anywhere on Main Street, it's not just for...
Well, 'cause, I mean, if that's underutilized, I just don't see the need right now for city to be spending money to be updating behind the Legion.
Right.
If we have utilization that we can use, we could forego spending money.
Yeah, and that's a possibility. Yeah, I mean, I know that, different council members feel differently about it, but I mean, this would be interesting information to bring to the whole council
Sure.
review.
I mean,
And my whole reason in asking for this was just being, you know, obnoxious and rude and crude and wanting to keep an eye on it, and
Mhm.
if I get asked a question, I can say, hey, you know, we're working on it. So,
Well, now we have the data, so that's
that
good
data,
to see too.
and I do appreciate it, and I was actually quite surprised that we are underutilized.
Yeah, especially around lunch.
Because when you go down there, it sure seems like it's busy, and that could be just 'cause some people take two spots when they park, just because they're narrow, I mean.
Well, they're narrow, and I mean, the vehicles haven't gotten any smaller, right? I mean, you see a
They
lot of
always
these
get bigger,
cab
kinda,
pickups
yeah.
that are pretty sizable now, so.
Yeah.
Purchase vehicle.
thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else we need to discuss this evening? If not, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you all. A little light reading in between,